Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we start, I want to say something. What you're about to hear is not a campfire story. This is not something someone made up to get views. I know the girl this happened to. I talked to her myself, and after everything she told me, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. So sit down, turn the lights on if you want, and listen carefully. Because some places in this world are not meant for people. And sometimes the sky above the trees is not as empty as we think. Her name is Maya. She was 26 when it happened, in October of 2021. She had been doing seasonal fieldwork for a university research program, cataloging plant species in remote sections of the Mark Twain National Forest in southern Missouri. Solo fieldwork. Just her, a tent, a notebook, and a radio that could reach the university station 20 miles away if conditions were right. She told me she loved that kind of work. Silence didn't scare her. She grew up in a small town in rural Indiana, the kind of place where you learn early that empty space isn't threatening. It's just space. She had done solo trips before. A week in the Shawnee National Forest, 10 days in the Ozark Hills the previous spring. She knew how to read weather, how to move through rough terrain, how to stay calm when things didn't go according to plan. The assignment was supposed to last 3 weeks. She was documenting understory plant recovery in areas that had been affected by drought. The forest was dry that autumn, stressed. The leaves had turned early and the brush crackled underfoot with every step. Fire risk was elevated across the whole region. But Maya wasn't there for fire observation. She was there for the plants, for the data, for the quiet hours of careful scientific work that she genuinely loved. She set up her base camp in a small clearing about 4 miles from the nearest gravel road. Close enough to hike out in a few hours if she needed to, far enough that she wouldn't be disturbed by the occasional maintenance vehicle or weekend off-roader. She had done everything right. She had filed her location with the university, left a detailed map with the department's secretary, and packed enough supplies for a month, even though she only planned to stay 3 weeks. The first 5 days were exactly what she expected. Long mornings collecting samples, afternoons writing up observations in her notebook, evenings reading by lantern light and listening to the forest settle around her. She described it as peaceful. The particular kind of quiet that city people find unsettling, but that she had always found comfortable. Like being held by something large and patient and completely indifferent to human problems. She told me she noticed the first sign something was wrong on day 6. Not wrong in an obvious way, just wrong in the way that your instincts register before your brain can name it. She was coming back to camp from a morning collection run when she stopped at the edge of the clearing and looked up. The canopy above her was moving. Not much, not in a way that would alarm you on its own, but the air was completely still. No wind at all. She had checked the forecast that morning. Calm conditions all day. And yet, the branches 30 feet above her head were shifting. She stood there for almost a full minute, watching. The movement wasn't random, the way wind movement is, where whole sections of canopy sway together. This was focused, concentrated in one area, moving in a direction. She watched it travel from above one side of the clearing to the other, maybe 100 feet, before it stopped. She went into her tent and wrote it down in her observation log. That was her training. Observe, record, look for patterns. She gave it a practical explanation. A large bird, maybe, or a squirrel moving through the upper branches. Something that belonged there. Something with a logical reason for being in those trees at that height. She told me she almost believed that explanation. She wanted to. The forest felt safe to her in a way that was almost physical, almost like a known relationship. She had spent years in places like this. She knew how they worked. She knew their sounds and their rhythms, and the way light moved through them at different hours. But something had changed. She couldn't name it yet. She just knew the forest felt different than it had the day before. Like someone had adjusted a setting somewhere, slightly, subtly, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Maya was always paying attention. That instinct, she told me, was probably the only reason she survived. On day 8, she found the branch. It had come down from somewhere in the upper canopy, maybe 40 feet up, and landed maybe 10 feet from her tent during the night. She hadn't heard it fall. She had heard nothing. But when she stepped outside in the morning, there it was. A limb about 4 inches in diameter, green wood, freshly broken at both ends. Not rotted through, not weakened by disease or age. Snapped clean, the way you'd snap a pencil. The force required to do that to a branch that size at that height was significant. She photographed it, measured it, noted it in her log. She checked the weather records she had saved on her satellite communicator. No wind events, no storms, nothing that would bring a branch like that down without warning. She radioed the university station and described what she had found. The researcher on duty suggested storm damage that she might have missed and reminded her that the forest was stressed by drought. Branches fell. It happened. She agreed because what else was she going to say? She had no other explanation. But she started sleeping with the tent zipper pulled all the way closed, with her boots on. Small things. Instinctive adjustments that she made without fully acknowledging why she was making them. On day 9, she heard the sound for the first time. It was early evening, maybe an hour before full dark. She was writing in her notebook when the forest went quiet. Not the gradual quiet of approaching night, when insects slow and birds find their roosts. Sudden quiet, complete, as if someone had pressed a button. She stopped writing and sat very still. Then, from somewhere in the canopy above and to her left, she heard something. A sound she struggled to describe to me when we talked. She said it was almost a vocalization, almost like a voice. Deep, sustained, pitched low enough that she felt it as much as heard it. But wrong in some way she couldn't explain. Like the idea of a human sound performed by something that had heard human sounds but didn't fully understand them. It lasted maybe 4 seconds, then silence again. She sat completely still for a very long time. The night insects eventually started again. The forest resumed its normal sounds, and she told herself it was an owl. A great horned owl can produce sounds that are surprisingly deep and strange. That was her explanation. That was what she wrote in her log that night. Owl, possibly. Unusual vocalization. Investigate in the morning. She did not sleep well. She kept her headlamp inside her sleeping bag where she could reach it instantly. She woke 3 times to the sound of something large moving through the canopy above her camp. Branches shifting and settling under weight she couldn't measure. Each time she told herself it was the wind. Each time the air outside her tent was completely still. By day 10, she had found the tracks. She had gone down to a muddy depression near a small drainage creek about 100 yards from her camp. The ground was soft there and held impressions well. She was checking it for animal activity as part of her standard morning survey. She had found deer tracks there on previous mornings, and once the distinctive print of a wild turkey. What she found that morning was different. Large prints. She measured them with the small ruler she carried in her field kit. 16 inches long, nearly 7 inches wide at the widest point. 5 toe impressions clearly visible. No claw marks. The depth suggested significant weight. She had a field guide in her pack. She checked it twice. The prints didn't match any animal native to Missouri. Not bear, not any large predator. The shape was wrong. The proportion was wrong. The stride length between prints was nearly 5 feet. And they walked in a straight line. Two-legged, bipedal. Like a person, but not a person. She photographed the tracks from every angle she could manage and radioed the university station. The researcher on duty told her to note the location and continue her survey. He said it was probably a hiker passing through. She looked at those prints again. 16 inches long, 7 inches wide, nearly 2 inches deep in soft earth. And she thought, no hiker made these. Nothing I can name made these. She broke camp that afternoon and moved her tent 200 yards to higher ground, with better sight lines to the surrounding forest. She told herself it was just a precaution. She told herself she would be fine. She was not fine. The night of day 12 was when she saw it. She had set up her trail camera. She carried one for documenting animal activity near sampling sites. Pointed at the clearing below her new campsite. She couldn't sleep. She sat in her tent with the flap open a few inches, watching the darkness. And then she saw movement. Not on the ground, in the canopy. 30 feet up, maybe more. A shape moving between the branches with a fluidity that she said made her stomach drop. Not a bird, not a squirrel. The shape was large, humanoid in outline but not human in proportion. Broader through the shoulders, longer in the arms. Moving through those branches the way you or I would walk down a hallway. Easy, familiar, completely at home. She did not move. She did not breathe. She sat absolutely still with her hand on her radio and watched it travel from one side of the clearing to the other, maybe 60 feet above her, pausing once to grip a branch and look down, looking down at her camp. The face. She said she could see the face in outline against the slightly lighter sky above the canopy. Was not right. Broader than a human face, the brow heavier, the jaw wider. Whatever it was, it looked at her camp for a long moment. Then it moved on. She waited an hour before she moved. She retrieved her trail camera at dawn, hands shaking so badly she dropped it twice. The footage confirmed everything she had seen. A large, dark shape moving through the canopy, arms reaching from branch to branch, the head turning toward the camera lens for just a moment before moving out of frame. She radioed the university station and told them she needed extraction. The researcher on duty told her to describe her situation. She described it as clearly as she could. Large, unknown animal in the canopy. Unusual tracks near camp. She wanted out. He told her weather conditions made road access uncertain for the next 24 hours. He would contact the Forest Service and see what could be arranged. She should stay in her camp, stay calm, and radio back in 6 hours. 6 hours. She was alone in that forest, and they wanted her to wait 6 hours. She stayed in her tent with her knife in her hand and the trail camera set to alert her phone whenever it triggered. It triggered 14 times that night. She watched the clips on her small screen, one after another, and each one showed the same thing: movement in the canopy above her clearing. Shapes that circled her camp without coming to ground. Intelligence in the pattern of it. Not random wandering. Study. Assessment. It was studying her. Deciding something. She understood that with absolute certainty and no scientific framework to explain it, and that clarity was the most terrifying thing she had ever experienced. She made the decision at 4 in the morning. She wasn't going to wait for extraction. She was going to walk out. The gravel road was 4 miles through dark forest, but she had her headlamp, her compass, her GPS unit, and she knew the trail she had used to enter. She repacked everything essential, left the rest, and stepped out of her tent into the darkness. The forest was quiet. Wrong quiet. The kind she had learned to recognize. She moved as quickly as she could without running, because something told her that running would trigger something she didn't want to trigger. She kept her headlamp on its highest setting, and she watched the canopy above her as she walked. Just the corners of her vision, checking, always checking. She made it maybe half a mile before she heard the breathing. It was coming from above her, not from the ground, from the branches overhead, maybe 25 feet up, moving with her as she walked, keeping pace, not closing the distance, just staying with her. Heavy, rhythmic exhalations, like something very large breathing slowly. She stopped. It stopped. She started walking again. It started moving again. She ran. She told me she didn't decide to run, her legs just started. And once she started, she couldn't stop. She crashed through brush, over roots, ducking branches she could barely see in the sweep of her headlamp. Behind her, above her, she could hear movement in the canopy, heavy and fast, keeping up with her easily. And then it made the sound again, the vocalization from the trees. Closer this time, much closer, from directly above her. Low and sustained and wrong in every frequency. She screamed. She couldn't stop herself. She just screamed and ran. She hit the gravel road at full speed and kept running. She ran 2 miles to the highway junction where her truck was parked. She got in, locked the doors, started the engine. She drove until she hit the first town with cell service and called the university emergency line from a gas station parking lot. She went back, eventually. Not to the forest, but back to the world, to her life. She finished her degree using data she had already collected. She never submitted the trail camera footage to the university. She told me she didn't trust what they would do with it. The footage is still on a drive in the storage unit in Indianapolis. She showed it to me. I watched those clips 3 times. What I saw in those trees, moving through the canopy 30 feet off the ground, I cannot explain with anything I know about the natural world. She doesn't do fieldwork anymore. She teaches at a community college now, plant biology, indoors, in a classroom with no windows facing anything taller than a parking lot hedge. She told me she still wakes up some nights hearing that sound, that almost voice from the branches above her. She told me one other thing before we ended our conversation. She said that about 6 months after it happened, she drove out to that section of the Mark Twain Forest. Not all the way in, just to the junction where the gravel road began. She parked there and sat in the car and looked at the tree line. And she said, in the canopy above the road, maybe 40 feet up, she saw the branches move. No wind, no storm. Just that focused, deliberate movement she had learned to recognize. Something traveling through the upper canopy, moving parallel to the road, heading in her direction. She left without getting out of the car. She said it was the last time she'll ever go back. She said she needed to see it once more in daylight to make sure she hadn't imagined everything, to make sure it was real. It was real. The forest confirmed it. And whatever lives up in that canopy, it remembered her too.